Hey everyone! Alright, this video is going to be over how to solve problems that involve both fractions and decimals. So your objective, I will be able to solve problems involving fractions and decimals. Let's review how to change a fraction to a decimal. So if you have a fraction, like let's say we have 1/4, you're going to put the numerator in the house and you're going to divide. So you're doing numerator divided by denominator, and we always say top dog in the house. Now 4 cannot go into 1, so I add a decimal and a 0. 4 goes into 10 2 times. We get 2 left over, so I'm going to annex a 0, and 4 will go into 25 times. So you can change fractions to decimals by simply doing numerator divided by denominator. If you need to change a decimal into a fraction, you really need to make sure you know your place value, specifically the ones that come after the decimal. So remember, right after the decimal, we have the tenths, then the hundredths, then the thousandths, and so on. So let's say you saw 0.7. So this, if we were to say this correctly, it would be 0 and 7/10. So since I would pronounce it 7/10, I would write 7/10, and then I would see if I need to reduce from there. If we had something like, let's say 0.27, the correct way we would say that is 27 hundredths. So I would put 27 over 100, and then we would see if we could reduce from there. Alright, so these fractions right here, these are fractions that you want to have memorized in regards to what they are as a decimal, because you're going to see these a lot. So like 1/2 is 0.5, 1/4 is 0.25, 1/5 is 0.2. You want to make sure you have those memorized because it makes working with things like that a lot quicker. Be careful with certain fractions. If you see fractions that have a denominator of 3, 6, 9, even 11, if you put top dog in the house and divide, you're going to get a repeating decimal. Now, a repeating decimal does not end. It is infinite, and you cannot operate with an infinite decimal because you would never stop writing it down. So if you see a fraction with any of these denominators, any multiple of 3, then you're going to have to leave it as a fraction. But if you see anything with like a 2, 4, a 5, even an 8, which would be 0.125, all of those you can convert to decimals. Okay, when we convert, we know, getting a little tongue-tied. We want to make sure that we convert if we're adding or subtracting, and we don't have to convert when multiplying or dividing, and I will show you what I mean by that in just a moment. Alright, so example 1, we have 1/3 plus 0.5. Now, this has a denominator of 3, so that means that we're going to have a repeating decimal if I divide that out. We can't work with a repeating decimal, so I have to leave this as a fraction. 0.5, if you remember from 2 slides ago, that is 1/2. And if you didn't remember that, this is pronounced 5/10, and we reduce that to get 1/2. So I really have 1/3 plus 1/2. If we are adding fractions, we must have a common denominator, and the least common multiple of 3 and 2 would be 6. 3 times 2 is 6. 1 times 2 is 2. 2 times 3 is 6. And 1 times 3 is 3. Denominator stays the same. And when we add the numerators, we get 2 plus 3, which is 5. Alright, example 2, we have 0.75 minus a negative 1/5. Now there are two things we could do here. We could take the 0.75 and we could say we have 75 hundredths. That can be reduced by 25, and we would get 3/4. So we could change this into 3/4. Here we have 1/5, and if you remember from 2 slides ago, that is 0.2. But if you didn't remember that, if you were to divide this out, you would get 0.2. So it's up to you which one you would want to convert, because you do have a choice here. So I'm going to go with the decimals. So I'm going to rewrite this as 0.75 minus, keep in mind this was a negative fraction, so this would be a negative decimal. And then we do not subtract with negative numbers, we add the opposite. So then I would simply have a positive 0.75 plus a positive 0.2, and we line up our decimals. And I would get 0.95. Now be careful with these, because especially if it's multiple choice. On example 2, I chose to convert my fraction to a decimal, but you may have your answer choices as fractions, and if that were to happen, make sure that you know how to change your answer into a fraction. Alright, example 3, we have 0.4 times 5/6. Okay, now I said you don't have to convert if you're multiplying or dividing. Here's what I mean by that. 0.4, that's 4/10. And if we reduce that, we would have 2/5. So I could do 2/5 times 5/6, or anytime we have a whole number, we simply put a 1 underneath it to make it look like a fraction. So I could also take a decimal and put a 1 underneath it. And then we would multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators, and then if it is necessary, we would either reduce or change it to a mixed number. It's up to you. I personally think that this looks easier, so that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to take that and I am going to move that over so I have a little bit more space to write with. Nope, oh no. Okay, hang on. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to multiply the numerators. 2 times 5 is 10, and 5 times 6 is 30. I can reduce this by 10, and that would be 1/3. Alright, example 4. I have 7.62 divided by 1/2. So again, I can, if I wanted to, I could take this decimal and I could make it a fraction. So I would have 7 and 62 hundredths. And then I would reduce, make it improper from there. Now, that's not going to be a whole lot of fun to work with. So I'm going to take the 1/2, and luckily we have 1/2 because that one is easy to convert to a decimal. If I put top dog in the house and divide, or if I simply have this memorized, I add a decimal and a 0, 2 would go into 10 5 times. So 1/2 is really 0.5. So I have 7.62 divided by 0.5. And now we're going to work that out. If we have a decimal on the outside, we have to move it however many times necessary to the right to make it look like a whole number. I move the decimal once to the right, and then I have to repeat the process inside. Okay. Now, 5 can go into 7 one time. I get 2 left over. 5 can go into 26 5 times, which is 25. And carry down the 2. 5 goes into 12 2 times. And then I'm going to annex a 0. And 5 goes into 20 4 times. This would be 15 and 24 hundredths. Alright, now it is time for you to try. You have 0.75 minus 1/2. So you're either going to have to change your decimal to a fraction or change your fraction to a decimal, as long as you don't get a repeating decimal. So make sure you get your question answered and have all your work shown in your spiral, and I will see you next class day.